Hey, welcome to the Tenable Vibrations Channel. This is a recap of one of my first trips on my year-long sabbatical. For those that are new to the channel or haven't been following along, I recently left corporate America about 6 months ago and taking a year-long sabbatical to travel the world. And one of my first stops was in South America. So I spent 2 months traveling throughout Chile and Argentina, and it was an amazing trip. So the purpose of this channel is to highlight some of my takeaways from that trip, maybe share some of the best restaurants or things that I did that if someone's traveling down there might want to check out. And if you haven't seen it already, in my latest newsletter, I covered some topics around, a barbecue I participated in Santiago, my portion of utilizing breath work to gain some level of relaxation in the Atacama Desert. And I also talked about, the excruciating knee pain I encountered on my W trek and how it is a very important reminder of the fragility we have from a health standpoint and how quickly someone can pivot from kind of being at the top of their game and feeling great about the path that they're on to quickly realizing that once a health concern comes up, you might have 99 problems, but in reality now at this point, you only have one, and that's to get healthy again. And some other great stuff. And so I'll include the link to that article below. But what I wanted to do is to spend a few minutes kind of expanding on the other parts of that trip that I ended up leaving out. The next portion of my trip took me down to the Patagonia region. I think the highlight of this portion of the trip was the day I spent kayaking. And so this was a very intimate experience. It was picked up by a driver and the tour guide, and it ended up just being us three. And so we went out to the point where we embarked on this start of our kayak adventure, and I had never really been kayaking before. But I was excited to get out in the sun. It was a beautiful day there in a Patagonia lake, green mountains in the background, kind of snow-capped mountains out there, and spent 2 hours just kayaking around. It was quite hard. It was a good workout, built up a good sweat. On our way to where we were going, our midway point, the lunch spot, came across some sea lions, and it was cool to see them interacting and get up close and personal with them. And then we pulled up to this farm, and it was basically a 60-acre farm that was right off this beautiful lake. And just sat down. The owner of the farm I think she was 72 or 82, had lived there her whole life. This was a family farm. And she had made this amazing homemade dinner or homemade lunch. This fried fish, salad, really fresh made bread. It was absolutely phenomenal. And she was telling us about the house, how it has no heat. I think it just got electricity within the past 5 years. It was still of original construction from 1920 or something like that. And, they were showing us the outhouse, which was still in use. And just the different things they did to kind of live off the land there on the farm. And she even offered to sell me, a few acres of land for not that bad of a price. And, I definitely was thinking about my little Patagonian getaway there off the lake in the mountains, but a little too secluded from me from a major airport in city. But it was really impressive to see her at that age, still vibrant, still seeking and really looking forward to forming connections with tourists. I mean, this is something that she does, I think, multiple times a week. She's been doing it for several years where she hosts these lunches for people who are coming out and doing this kayak experience. And it was just an awesome, awesome day. And finished it with a little cold plunge in the water once we wrapped up our kayaking thing, which was awesome. After a nice, hot, long day kayaking was to jump in that cold water there and cool off a little bit. The next portion of the trip took me up to Torres del Paine, and this is a famous national park in Chile. This is where, for those who might be familiar with Patagonia, there's two very popular treks, both of which are in Torres del Paine. One's called W Trek, one's called the O Trek. I participated in the W Trek. W Trek is a 5-day adventure. The O Trek is about 10. The first day of the hiking was probably, in my opinion, the hardest. We climbed, I think it was around 1,300 meters in elevation. It was around 22 miles It was a decent hike. The last portion, though, that last, let's say, mile or so is pretty straight uphill. And so that was a pretty brutal part. But getting up to the top of that thing was breathtaking. I mean, it felt like, Lord of the Rings, granite towers. I mean, crystal blue water in the wind kind of pushing it, creating waves, but also the clouds are moving quite rapidly. And you can see at various points just how quickly the landscape and visuals against the rocks change as the clouds kind of go by and move by. And I had moved out pretty quickly because I knew how busy it would get in the morning. And so luckily when I was up there, it was generally pretty quiet. But as I was making my way back down, I could definitely start to see the increase in traffic. But it was really cool. They had this outpost on the way back. And so I stopped and had, a beer or two and ate lunch there at the outpost. And there was tons of people out hanging out, eating. The weather was beautiful. And it was just an amazing experience. And it was nice to get back. I had made some friends with some people from Canada, Oriani, Lucas. Yeah, Lucas was his name. Yeah, they were awesome. And so we were kind of following along the same path, staying at the same camps, and we were kind of regrouping towards the end of every day, sharing experiences. And it turns out they were actually going to the next spots that I was going to too. So Calafate, El Chat, and they were also going to partake in some days of hiking in the Argentinian side of Patagonia. And so we had developed a pretty good relationship from there. And so we actually linked back up in El Chat and we did some hiking. There's a famous mountain there called Mount Fitzroy. Really great trek. Also very difficult. The last mile or two of that is absolutely brutal. Leading up to it, it's not too bad. I believe it's about 12 miles in total, and about 10 of it is fairly flat. And then the last two are like straight up. And that was hard. Unfortunately, the view at the top that particular day was pretty cloudy, so it wasn't necessarily the best. But it was just fun to be out there with two people that I had met along the way. And we had a good day. Otherwise, went grab some beers afterwards, which was nice and refreshing. Nothing like a good beer after long days of hiking. But something that stood out to me was just, I thought it was super funny. At one point very quickly within meeting Lucas Oriani, Lucas diving into, no joke, within 5 minutes, maple syrup, hockey, and just some things that are very stereotypical interests of Canadians. And, I kind of laughed to myself, but kept it to myself. And then a few minutes later, it turned to me, so like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm from Texas. I'm like, all right, so you you have your F-150 truck and, you shoot your guns, you like steak, football, American football. I was like, actually, I could answer in the affirmative to all of that. And so it was pretty quickly to very quickly see the stereotypical mirror be shown right back at me as the Texas man. But another thing that stood out to me about cultural differences in the way people live is not just through the stories of my friends from Canada, but also through sharing and experiences in Argentina and Chile, was that there's just such a higher level of appreciation for spending time on vacation, for valuing travel experiences, connection to nature, such a lower emphasis on the type of work or the productivity from your work as being a symbol of status. I just thought, what a cool takeaway that, I was able to see by jumping into these different cultural experiences and interacting with folks from different parts of the world. It definitely, caused me to pause and kind of reframe my own priorities and thoughts towards the different things that I'm valuing. And luckily, I was kind of already on that path of kind of working towards minimizing fixation on work and more so working to prioritize, time in nature, travel, relationships with friends and family, and doing work that is more purposeful in nature. And so it felt like there was some bit of validation or realization that, I'm on the right path in that regard. From there, stopped in a few cities, ended up in Mendoza. I had a good friend of mine join the trip, and we spent 2 days in wine country. A few of the spots we went to, Alta Vista, had an amazing scenery. It's awesome. Andaluna, phenomenal wine, also extremely beautiful views. I would highly recommend going to either one of those if you ever go down to Mendoza. And then one of the last wineries we went to is Domaine Bousquet. And that was actually where we had lunch. It was, all organic winery. The food was absolutely phenomenal. The views from their kind of terrace rooftop lounge area was breathtaking. And so I would definitely stop by that winery for sure. If you're limited on time in Mendoza, there's a ton of great options, but that certainly is a good one. Man, then wrapped up in Buenos Aires. And Buenos Aires was one of the coolest cities I've ever been to. One of my favorite restaurants was El Preferido. I thought that might have been the best meal of the trip. There was also a really great steakhouse in Chile that I forgot to mention. A couple other bars that were good in Buenos Aires. La Ut, super fun, late night spot, good for dancing. There's also Tres Manos, which is a cocktail lounge, definitely a good pregame spot. Would highly recommend either of those. And then wrapped up my trip, met a crew from Dallas, Texas, actually, at an Argentinian dinner experience. It's about, maybe five of them around, mid-40s, low 50s age, and all participating in a misogi together. I thought it was really cool to see a group of guys that age with families and careers, prioritizing time together, but also taking the opportunity to do a very, very challenging thing physically that is also connected with nature. And they were actually going off to do the W trek. So the trek that I had just left, a couple of weeks prior. And it was just a good, I think, reminder for me that, I think a lot of the feedback they provided me was like, hey, I'm glad you're doing that at this age. Things with time don't get easier. And so for me, it was just a really cool opportunity to prioritize this type of physical activity and this engagement at this point in my life and not defer it for a future that's not necessarily guaranteed while I still am, in kind of, good physical condition. But it was also a good reminder just to see the level of health and fitness that they were in too, to kind of continue to reinforce the importance of staying sharp in those regards so that if and when I get to that point, there's still quite a bit of longevity and the ability to participate in things like that in the W trek. So all in all, it's an awesome trip. Look forward to sharing more stories and feedback from upcoming travels. All right, stay tuned.